Hi, yeah, so a bit of a different one today. I've done lots of videos talking about how to play certain things and how to get sounds out of synths, but I've never actually done a video talking about how to make money out of the music business. It's something I feel qualified to talk about because I've been a professional musician for 35 years now. Hasn't always been plain sailing, but I have been successful. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm a keyboard player in a band called Jamiroquai. It's a world famous band. We've had like 30 million albums sold. I've co-written a lot of songs in that band, and I've also co-written songs for other people. Recently I had a song I wrote with a guy called Purple Disco Machine. It's had like 500 million streams. So I've done well making music, writing music, as well as playing music. So I've had success. I've had my droughts as well. I've had my hard times. And I thought it'd be a good way to start this video by talking about my story. And then I'm just going to give you a few tips about what I think are good things to do if you're trying to make it in the music business. By the way, making it in the music business for me means just making a living out of music. If you're doing that, if you're making a living doing what you love more than anything else, then you are truly lucky. You might not be the richest people in the world, but you're the most lucky because you're just happy every day. You know, I just love work and I can't work enough. I wish there were more years in my life that I could work. And I think anyone who feels like that about their job is really, really lucky. So anyway, let's start with my story. I started out as a trumpet player, actually. When I was a kid, I was talented at trumpet and I was classically trained in that. I was in like the National Kids Orchestra. And then I got into my teens and I got, it just wasn't fashionable for me to be doing classical music in my head, and I gravitated towards piano. There was always a piano in the house because my dad had a music shop and he was musical. So I just kind of taught myself the piano, and age like 15 or 16, my brother had a friend who had a band and their keyboard player quit, and my brother's friend said, well, why don't you try it for the band? So I was like, yeah, okay, why not? Tried out for the band, got the gig. And then so by the age of 16, I was playing in this little originals band, making money, playing small pubs in my hometown of Bournemouth. Because it was quite a small town, people quickly saw me that I was a young talent, and, I straight away started to get other stuff came in. That's a good thing about being in a small pond. You get seen a lot more easily than when you're in a big city. So I started working with local bands. I run into a husband and wife team called Howie Casey and Sheila Casey. And Howie Casey used to play for Paul McCartney, and he kind of semi-retired and come down to Bournemouth. So he had a really good band, and I started playing in his band. And they were a great couple to sort of teach me like the spirit of rock and roll, because they got on stage every night and they always gave it their all, like they were at Wembley Arena. Didn't matter how crappy the gig, they always gave it some. So it was a really great education for me. Like by the time I was 18, I was traveling to places like Dubai and staying for a couple of weeks doing gigs. So that went on for a few years. I was working, I was getting some money, but it wasn't really going anywhere. And I realized that being in a hometown, small place like Bournemouth, it wasn't really going to go anywhere much further. So I moved up to London. I had a friend, an older friend who'd already moved up to London, and he said, why don't you come up and we'll form a busking band? So I did that. I just went up and we started busking. The band didn't last too long, but I ended up just busking on my own. And that's how I first survived in London. I just go out busking every morning, make enough money to pay my rent and, food and what I needed, go home and start trying to make my own music. It took me a couple of years to really find anyone in London, get established. But finally I started getting some gigs, just duo gigs. Some particular guy found me that I was useful, that I could learn songs, and he put me with his girlfriend, and then I started doing other singers as well. Before I knew it, I was working 4 or 5 nights a week, often doing these duo things. From that, I started doing band gigs, soul nights, and because it was in London, there was some really good people, great singers. It was a brilliant education because every night I had to play different songs in different keys. A lot of the soul singers played the same songs, but they all wanted to do them in different keys. So that was a really great kind of education for me to have to switch into a different key. Some people just jammed and they just do stuff on the fly, and you'd have to be there and follow it and be on it. So it was the best possible education. The other great thing about it was when I was doing the duo gigs, I was often playing left-hand bass. So it made my left hand really strong and independent. So these were my sort of formative years, and that went on for quite a while. I was quite happy. You know, I was playing 5-6 nights a week, but I was only earning, you know, maybe 70-80 quid a night. It was an all right living, you know, that's all it was. In the meantime, I was doing production with a friend of mine. You know, we were making records and doing dance records and things like that, hustling them out, getting 2 or 3 grand here and there for some stuff. And it went on like that for quite a while. The thing about when you're doing gigs, you're doing those smaller gigs, you start to run into people that are doing the bigger gigs. Because even though they're doing the bigger gigs, they still need to work, you know, so they'll do the weddings or they'll do the club nights when they're not on tour. So I got to meet those people, but they never recommended me for the big gigs. And I always wondered, why aren't you recommending me for the big gigs? But the reason is, when you're doing a big gig yourself, it's quite nerve-wracking to recommend someone for something like that, because you know it's a very different thing from doing these small club dates. And you're never quite sure how someone's going to react when they get the bigger gig. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg situation. You know, everyone knew I was a good player, but I just could never get that break until one day, finally I got let into the club. You know, a drummer called Frank Tonto, I'll never forget how grateful I was that he put me up to audition for a band called Miss Dynamite. She was like a cool act in the 90s. This is the 90s we're talking about. And they had a keyboard player and they wanted a second keyboard player. So I went to the audition and they really liked me. But in the end, they decided they didn't need a second keyboard player. So that was cool. But in the band happened to be Stuart Zender and Simon Katz, who were the original bass player and guitarist from Jamiroquai. And it was just coincidence that Toby Smith, the original keyboard player from Jamiroquai, quit just after that. And the drummer called those guys to say, you know, you got any recommendations, any keyboard players? And my name got thrown into the hat. So they obviously must have liked me. So I got the call from Derek, the drummer from Jamiroquai, do you want to come and audition? And at the time, I was in quite a low place, actually. I just split up with my girlfriend. We had a baby together. You know, I was really kind of a bit down about that. Kid was just a baby. And I said to him, I'm not sure if I want to go around the world. You know, I've got this kid. And he was like, don't worry about it. I've got kids. You know, we're all in the same boat. Just come and try out. So I did. I came and tried out and I got the gig.
People, yeah. Oh, but never ever come back down.
So I got the gig, but obviously it wasn't just plain sailing from there on. You know, I was replacing a keyboard player who was very much beloved of all the fans. He was a real integral part of the original band. And, you know, it was big shoes to fill. Jay was very used to the way he played as well. So I had to adapt super quickly and not get the hump, you know, when people told me, no, don't do it this way, do it that way. I had to really adjust to this big gig situation. And that's where you got to put your ego aside and think, okay, what's required in this situation? I had to change the way I played, because you play much differently when you're playing a huge venue. You have to play a lot less, and you have to learn that pretty quickly. And you also have to learn that the singer is very dependent on you as the keyboard player, because they're pitching to your chords most of the time. Jay could hear everything that I was doing because I was right up in his monitors, because he needs to pitch. So, you know, it was a bumpy few weeks to get started, but I just went for it. You know, when they pointed at me to solo, I just ripped it out as hard as I could. And when they weren't doing that, I just made sure that I was laying down and doing what I was required to be doing. So after that initial tour, you know, I'd really established myself with the band. Jay started making another album, got me involved, and I co-wrote most of the songs on that album with him and Rob, the guitar player. And I've gone on from success to success like that. The last album I actually co-produced with Jay and co-wrote all the songs with him. I've worked with other artists in between, as I said before, and I had quite a lot of success. I do a lot of sessions for different people. And the main thing I think you can take from that story is any opportunity that came, I did it. When I was in Bournemouth, I was just starting out, I would do any crappy gig. It didn't matter. Someone called me up, do you want to do a gig? It's 40 quid in a British Legion, which for you non-UK people is like the most uncool place where old boys go to drink their beer. I'd do it, and be playing the national anthem at the end of the night. I just did whatever. All of it was good experience. So if you're starting out as a player, just never say no to gigs. There's absolutely no point in saying no. Even if it's just like £10, you got a £10 gig, or you sit at home, scratching your ass, you might as well go and do the gig, because you just never know what's going to happen at that gig. Someone might see you and go, oh, they were really good. Yeah, let's get them involved in this. Or you just do the gig and it's an experience in itself. It's a chance for you to be on stage, learning how to perform to people, because that's a very important thing. I remember working with a very talented singer a few years ago. I was co-writing with her and she got a deal. And I kept saying to her, you should get out and do any tiny gigs. And she was like, no, my management, they don't want me to get out because they want to keep the whole thing secret. But that was really bad advice from the management, because what happened was she did get the big deal. She was suddenly on massive TV shows and she had absolutely no experience as a performer. Consequently, she wasn't very good. She didn't set the room alight, because how can you when you're suddenly under so much pressure and you've never had any experience? That's why just doing gigs is the biggest advice I can give to you. Do any gig you can. Doesn't matter what it is. The other thing I would say is, when you go to do gigs or people ask you to do a gig and they give you a set of tunes, be the person that knows the tunes better than anyone else. Do your homework better than anyone else, and that will really stand you in good stead. You want to be the person that everyone's looking to go, oh, what's that A minor chord? If you're the one that's in control like that, suddenly people are looking up to you and respecting you, and they think, he or she is a very handy person to have around. And not only learn the tunes really well, get the sounds up together. So if you're doing a cover gig, it might be the most crappy cover gig, get the sound. Spend hours getting the sounds as good as you can to the original record. People will notice. They'll notice, wow. And also get the parts off. Don't just learn the chords, learn the parts. Because a lot of these kind of cover bands, they're playing classic tunes that have iconic riffs or lines. You should play them. You should respect these great tunes and play the lines with the right sound. And when you do the gigs, just do that. Just play the sounds. Don't add loads of stuff everywhere. Pick your moments to... Who's that? Okay. It's work related. That's all I'll say. Serve the tune. That's really good advice. When you're doing a gig, serve the tune. Don't think about your ego. We've all got big egos. Most musicians have some ego. But it's like you will look best. Your ego will best be served by you serving the song and just playing exactly what's required. Very occasionally, you might show a little bit of your flair. But don't do it every 4 bars. You'll just get on people's nerves and they won't want to book you again. Whereas if you just lay down the stuff, play in time, concentrate on your timing 100%, playing in time, playing the right part, being very aware of what's going on around you, being aware of your volume in relation to the other people in the band. That's an annoying thing where people come to a gig and it's just a tiny gig, but someone's just cranked themselves up, to a crazy volume. It just ruins the whole balance of the gig. And that's someone not being able to put their ego aside and just think about what's required. You're in a small bar, but the guitarist just cranks their amp up so loud, it's just painful. Things like that are very annoying. So as a keyboard player as well, you've got to think about that. What's your volume in relation to everyone else? Are you fitting in? Is everyone happy? These are the things to think about when you're doing a gig. So you're playing the tunes better than everyone else. You know, you've got the sounds down. Everyone's going, wow, that actually sounds proper. You've got the right volume. The other thing to mention when you're doing a gig is your personality. You know, obviously we can't help what our personalities are, but don't be abrasive. That's the main thing. You know, don't get on people's nerves. You just want to be someone that doesn't always complain every 5 minutes. You know, have fun, but when it's time to be businesslike, be businesslike. Don't be the difficult person, basically. Because there's quite a few musicians I can think of over the years who are very talented, but they were difficult people. And when they're difficult people like that, you just don't want them around. You know, even though they're great, you just don't want them around. Talent doesn't circumnavigate those sort of things. Your personality is really important, and being able to get on with other people is really important in this business. It's a very social business. If you go on tour, you're stuck in a van with people, you're stuck on a bus. You know, if you're just obnoxious, people aren't going to want you around. It's as simple as that. So try not to be obnoxious. I'm sure you're not. But anyway, try not to be. And obviously, when you're not working, when you're not gigging, just be practicing. Just practice, practice, practice. Every day should be doing something musically. You know, I work every day. It doesn't matter what's going on. You know, I'm either trying to write a tune, I'm doing a session for someone. If I'm not doing any of those things, I'm practicing, or I'm doing a video like this. I'm always trying to do something. You've got to work hard. They say the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I think that's really true. You know, so if you're the one that was practicing 5 hours a day, you know, you're going to get good. You are going to get better and better and better. And you've just got to keep your head down. Do anything that comes, because what happens when you're self-employed, it all branches out. You know, it just branches out. You've got to start somewhere. Do something. Just do something. Don't dream about, oh, I want to be a superstar. For a lot of people, it doesn't work like that. You know, some people are lucky. It does happen. You know, you're 19, suddenly you got a major record deal, it blows up. You know, could be the business has already spat you out by the time you're 25 in that instance. I think a slow build is quite good personally, you know, where you learn your trade, you do small gigs, you do bigger gigs, you do massive gigs, you know, it goes like that bit by bit. And you just got to keep faith and keep rolling with it. I suppose the fact that I'm talking to you via YouTube and you're watching me says a lot as well. These days you have to think about, you know, how to get yourself out there. I turned my back on that for a long time and now I realise how silly that was. You know, I didn't think I wanted to be public like that. But actually this YouTube, I mean, I don't make much money out of YouTube. It's just a small bit of change really. But it has been great in that it gets people into my world, you know, and it's already drawn celebrities into my world. I've got work out of it, a lot of work out of it. Things come from it. Being famous these days, unfortunately, you know, counts for a lot. Obviously, you've got to have the talent to back it up, but you should try to, you know, make sure when you do Instagram and all those things that it looks good. You know, you do good posts. You know, don't do them every day. You just get on people's nerves like that as well. But try and do good quality posts. You know, yourself playing, sounding good. Make sure you look all right as well. You know, it's not all about looks. You know, I'm a very average looking person. Ed Sheeran, Adele, you know, you name it. There's lots of people out there that are not beautiful, but they're successful. They make the best of themselves though. You know, they put themselves over in the best light they can. And you have to think about that these days. You know, just trying to put yourself over in a good light. Think about how you could make a post that might be interesting and might get people involved in your world. It's another route. I'm not saying it's the only route. You could never do any social media and be massive. You know, it's not the only thing in the world by any means, but it's an extra tool that didn't used to exist but does now, and it's part of the game, you know, and we have to sort of embrace that to a degree. If you're making your own music as well, don't spend loads of money on making tunes. Don't spend $5,000 on a video and drop it on YouTube, because you're just going to be disappointed because it's going to go nowhere. You have to pull people in slowly. So if you're making music, make music, release it, but don't put loads of money into it. Try to think of other ways of promoting it if you can. If it's putting on gigs yourself, it's really difficult, obviously. Everyone's got to find their own way. But I would just say, just don't spend loads of money thinking this is it. Do it bit by bit. Put out a tune. Don't be precious about it. If nothing happens with it, just start doing another one, and just constantly be on the lookout of how you can try and get your music to the next level. There's no easy answer to that. There really isn't. If you're a writer, you can go around publishers. That's worth doing, calling up publishers, saying you got some music. It's hard to get in the door sometimes, but you never know. There's people there looking for music, so you can do it. But a lot of the time, they'll want to look at your Instagram and YouTube, so it's a bit of you've got no numbers. These days, it's a numbers crunching game, so people can see that you've got low numbers. They don't get excited. Even I feel that, if some young artist approaches me, I want to do some writing, I will go and have a look at their Instagram, their YouTube, and see, you've got 10 followers and you've had 3 plays on your tune. So I'm not sure. If it's amazing music, I might think, well, there's possibly something here. But unfortunately, it's quite hard to blag your way these days because everyone can see the numbers. You can't be hyping yourself up beyond what you really are. So doing an expensive video is a waste of time. I think doing a live cover version of something, either as a piano player or singer or whatever you are, is a great idea on YouTube. Choose a really popular song, try to do a really imaginative version of it. You got much more chance of pulling people in because they know the song. They don't know you, but they know the song, they know that artist, and you can tag the artist and the song. So when people research that person, you might come up, that's a good way in. Another good bit of advice I can give you is, if you're sitting at home, just learn songs. Learn hundreds and hundreds of songs, all the classics, all the modern hits. Just learn as much songs as you can, because then if you do start to get some covers gigs, it's going to stand you in great stead to know all these tunes, and practice them in different keys. Try to, say, pick a song like Don't You Worry About a Thing by Stevie Wonder, right? It's an old classic. Try to play that in different keys. Try to transpose it. It's really hard. Learn the song. It's got a lot of chords to it, and try to get used to transposing in your mind. A good way of doing that is thinking in numbers rather than notes. So it's in E flat, that song. I think it goes like E flat, B flat, E flat, A flat. But instead of thinking about it like that, thinking about it like 1, 5, 1, 4. That being the number in the scale, E flat is number 1, F number 2, G flat number 3, A flat number 4, B flat number 5, like that. If you think about it like that, then it's much easier to transpose into different keys. So it's a really good thing to do that. Learn tons of songs, use that numbers system, and then just randomly pick a key. Okay, I'm going to do it in this key. It's a really good practice, honestly. It's great for you. It'll keep you mentally on your toes, because you will have situations like that as a live keyboard player. And I've seen people get caught out, when they're just using the transpose button all the time, and they can play anything in C, but as soon as they might turn up at a gig, there's no keyboard, it's a piano, or it's a Fender Rhodes, there's no transpose button, then you're really in trouble. So learn to play things in every key. That is crucial, really is crucial. I didn't do that at the very beginning of my career. I was using the transpose button. I think I remember getting caught out one night thinking, Christ, I'll never let that happen to me again. And I really tried hard, learning things in every key. It's great advice to do that. Beyond knowing the songs, the other great thing about it is you really learn that way how songs are constructed. What a great song has in it, because there are building blocks. They have a narrative, all these great songs. And when you learn a load of them, you really learn a lot of information about how to put together good songs yourself. They're reference points for you. So that's a really good thing to do, is learn songs. The other thing I want to say about practicing is, when you practice, spend most of your time practicing, like learning songs, chords, transposition, rhythm, playing in time, getting your groove great. Those are the most important things, because there are people that spend 90% of their time just on soloing and, pyrotechnics. But that is like 1% of what you might do in a gig. It can help you to get a gig if you're like really an amazing soloist, but it is a very small part of gigs. it's much more important that you can play an arrangement with sensitivity, with good feel, maybe be able to cover two parts with your left and right hands. Things like that are more important, I would say, than being able to burn like Herbie Hancock, unless you want to be a jazz musician. Obviously, if you want to be a jazz musician, then, first of all, have a rich uncle is good. You know what they say, how to become a millionaire as a jazz musician? Start off as a billionaire. But, if you want to be a jazz musician, great, then obviously you have to study all the theory, all the improvisational techniques. I'm not a jazz musician, so that's not my world. But being in a pop music, playing big arenas, you basically need to be able to cover parts very well and be very versatile, adapt yourself, have a good personality, have fun, don't get on people's nerves. Play in time. Play in time. That is crucial. I hope you got something from this. I'm sorry there's no magical golden ticket that's going to make you a rock star overnight, but the reality of it is it's like anything else. The more you put in, the more you'll get out. Until next time, adios.